We're so appreciative that you're taking time out of your day to tune in and learn about retirement planning and financial planning here at Retiring Well. We got 5 action-packed segments lined up for you today that we feel are going to be very educational and powerful for you. First, John and I are going to start off talking about Valentine's Day. Valentine's week here, what does that have to do with finances and some things you could help prepare your loved ones for? Then Ray's going to join us and talk about why beneficiaries need constant updates and regular changes. It's important to tune in here. You don't want to leave your beneficiaries in the dark. Then Joe's going to stop in and talk about why he doesn't like a certain individual out there and some of the opinions that individual gives. It's very entertaining and enlightening, and I think you're going to be surprised. And then Jack and Leah are going to join us and do a dual segment about who do you want sitting across the table from you. When you're talking about your life savings and your future financial dreams, who do you want sitting across that table and helping you plan to retire well? And then wrapping up the show, Ashley's going to be talking about inflation versus your cash. What happens to that cash as inflation rises around us? All this and so much more coming at you today on Retiring Well.
Retiring Well, brought to you by Centennial Wealth Advisory, financial advisors specializing in retirement planning and serving all of Northern Michigan. Retiring Well, plan to retire well.
Well, here we are talking about Valentine's Day. So I know I'm coming up here soon on 22 years of marriage. How many years for you?
I'm going to be 18 this August.
Okay, there we go. So you were quick with that. That was impressive. So it changes a little bit over time from the dating and engaged to being married and then 20 plus years, but you still want to celebrate that time with your loved ones. And that's where it comes back to this idea of, with financial planning, sort of how to give the gift to your loved ones of how to be prepared. As I think of it, there's a lot of different areas when it comes to your finances where maybe you're not, if you're married, you're not necessarily communicating on all different levels of that, and where not only for a spouse, but also for children or whoever your beneficiaries are, have you necessarily put that all together as sort of a gift to make sure that you've planned well and have things prepared for them?
Oh, absolutely. So true, John. Oftentimes, when folks come in and meet with us and as we get to know them over time, it becomes fairly evident that one of the members of the relationship often kind of is the financial dominant one, right? They're taking charge of things, whether they're paying the bills, they know where everything's at, and they just kind of know how everything works. And the other individual oftentimes does not. And many times, sometimes there's a little more sharing of responsibilities. But, again, when we talk about kind of preparing for that is, again, not saying that everybody needs to share everything equally, but making sure at least both individuals and, like John said, children and stuff start to understand where things are at and how things work. But boy, because when that time comes, we've seen it work both ways for those individuals.
Yeah, I think I'd start ultimately with just your basic emergency fund. Make sure that you have savings on hand so that if in the case of an emergency or something happens to a loved one, that you have access to funds that ultimately can be used for some of those short-term needs and quick turnaround. The other area that I'd like to talk about is insurance. I think a lot of times people don't necessarily want to talk about insurance. It's not all that exciting, but you want to be preparing for, okay, the ultimate life insurance. Is that necessary within your plan? For a lot of you that may have a young family, yeah, most definitely you want to make sure that your spouse, that your children are going to be taken care of, and a lot of times, if you're fairly healthy and everything, you can get some pretty reasonably priced life insurance for a period of time, more like term insurance that may make sense early on. But again, there's a lot of different types of life insurance. Along with that, you think about disability insurance. If you were to be injured and unable to work in your current position, what sort of income are you going to be able to provide for your family? So having some of these in line, along with maybe long-term care insurance, again, all different areas that here at our firm that we have different licensed insurance agents that are able to talk to you about all of those, along with health insurance and how they can play a role in your overall retirement plan.
Absolutely. And you thinking about life insurance makes me think, John, then about like estate planning and naming proper beneficiaries on all of your accounts. You know, not just your retirement accounts, making sure you go down the line, whether that's individual retirement accounts, whether that's Roth IRAs, old 401k plans that maybe you have still hanging out there. Even if you're actively still working, doing kind of an occasional check-in to make sure those are up to date. Don't forget those bank accounts and stuff that maybe you got at the local bank or credit union, and making sure there's payable on deaths on those, and if it isn't already a joint account and such like that. Again, you don't want to leave assets behind that don't know where to go. Do you have proper wills or trust prepared to make sure things are designated for those that are still around after you're gone? And then kind of thinking a little bit further when we start to talk about managing finances and stuff, consider debt. You know, what debt do you already have for yourself or for your family, whether that's mortgages or car or credit cards? You know, how is that titled? What are the plans for that when you're gone? And just obviously, if possible, while you're living, trying to reduce that if you can.
Yeah, and then lastly, organize that information and have open conversations. So it's one where I know at our firm, like, we encourage clients to bring in their children and eventually maybe grandchildren or whoever may be involved with their with who's going to receive their assets, and just have those open conversations together so that they know, okay, what are the next steps? Because that can be a scary thing as well if you have no clue, okay, where do I go? What do I do? So again, put that information together, and if you have concerns about any of this or haven't sat down with an advisor, we encourage you to give us a call here at Centennial Wealth Advisory.
When you have confidence in your retirement future, you can live the life you've always imagined. Because of planning, you now have time to reflect on the wonderful memories of your life. You and your spouse finally have the luxury of leisure time together. To spend fun times with your grandkids, sharing the joy of their excitement about life. Smiling at the thought of quality time with your children and of picking up the check. At last, you have time to breathe and rekindle the love of your life. Why? Because you imagined what could be. You planned for retirement. So today, you own your future.
Now I want you to stop and think with me for a moment. If something happened to you tomorrow, do you know exactly where your money would go? Not where you think it would go, but where your money would go based on what's written on your accounts right now. That's what I'm talking about today, beneficiaries. Why you need them and why you should update them. It's one of the simplest parts of your financial life, yet at the same time, it's often the most ignored. Now, a beneficiary is the person or people who receive money from your accounts when you die. Life insurance policies, retirement accounts, and investment accounts usually have beneficiaries. Now, in most of the time, you're going to see two types listed. The primary beneficiary is the first in line to receive your assets. A contingent beneficiary is the backup, so they're only going to receive the money if the primary beneficiary can't. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, I have a will or a trust, so do I really need to list beneficiaries? The answer is absolutely yes. Beneficiary designations override wills and trusts. Now, that surprises a lot of people. You can have a perfectly written will or a trust that says exactly who should receive what, but if the beneficiary on your retirement account says something different or nothing at all, the form that you filled out maybe years ago automatically wins. And this is where problems tend to show up, because most people treat beneficiaries as a set it and forget it task. So you're going to fill it out once, then maybe move on and never look back. But life doesn't stay the same, right? People get married, they get divorced, they have children, there's a remarriage or a blended family, maybe somebody listed as the beneficiary passes away. All of these moments should be a signal to stop and look at your beneficiary designations for potential updates. And if you don't, it could create issues. You want your money to leave a legacy and be a blessing to your beneficiaries, not create unwanted drama or division. Now, one of the most common issues is an ex-spouse still being listed as a beneficiary. Even after a divorce, the ex-spouse is still entitled to the money if the beneficiary form was never updated. So I recently had a client request to change the beneficiary structure on his accounts. Now, the client had multiple beneficiaries listed, including his brother's wife, and other siblings. Now, sadly, his brother passed away. His brother's wife ended up remarrying, so he decided to remove her as a beneficiary and add his nieces and nephews. And being proactive in this situation and changing this helps ensure the client's money is distributed according to his wishes if he were to pass. Now, another problem happens when no beneficiary is listed at all. Now, in that case, the money usually goes into what's called probate. Now, even if you have a will or trust in place, probate can be slow and expensive, not to mention stressful for family members who are already dealing with enough. Now, if you do have a trust, the trust can be listed as a beneficiary on your accounts. It's important to review this with your attorney. At Centennial Wealth Advisory, we partner with local attorneys who can help you walk through this. They can also assist developing a will or trust if this is something that you have not done yet or are thinking about. And while you're updating, double check the percentages if you have multiple beneficiaries to ensure that your money is distributed the way you'd like it to be. And all of these situations are surprisingly common, and almost all of them are avoidable. There is good news, though, that fixing this is generally easy. In many cases, you can log into your account online, click a few buttons, and update your beneficiaries in just minutes. There are some institutions that may require a form with physical signature to be returned to. So, how often should you review your beneficiaries? Well, a good rule of thumb is maybe every 2 to 3 years, even if nothing major has changed. And you should always review them after any big life event, like a marriage, a divorce, the birth of a child, or the death of someone listed on the form. So take a few minutes to check and make sure the right names are listed. Make sure the percentages still make sense, and make sure your backup beneficiaries are in place. This small step can prevent confusion, delays, and hard feelings later on, and it ensures that your money ends up exactly where you want it to go, leaving a legacy and blessing for your loved ones.
Living life isn't always easy. It puts up challenges and obstacles you'll have to overcome. There are responsibilities. You put an effort to provide and take care of your family, to save and invest, to balance work and life. Planning is the first step to succeeding. Plan to retire well.
We live in a world now where financial advice is everywhere. Whether you're on TV, scrolling social media, listening to a podcast, everyone has an opinion about money. And many of these voices we hear are very confident, loud, and incredibly popular. The problem is popularity does not necessarily mean expertise in the investment world. And more importantly, advice that worked 10, 15, 20 years ago maybe isn't going to be the best advice we can be using today. Most people are not short on information. Nowadays we're very overwhelmed by it. And it's important that we not only look at the information, but we digest the misinformation out there as well. We hear these blanket rules like always do this, never do that, debt is bad, stocks always win, put everything in real estate. And that gives us some comfort because they're easy to remember and we hear them all the time. But what we have to be careful with is the economy changes, right? Markets change, tax laws change, life changes. Again, so it worked 10, 15, 20 years ago was built on a completely different environment to now. So one of the examples I use a lot is the 1980s. Okay, if you look back to the 1980s, savings rates were incredibly high. So people will say, well, I had a savings account that was 10%. Right, but you also had a mortgage that was probably 16% at that time as well. So when we think about like debt as an example, people will say, well, debt is terrible, you should never carry debt. Well, in 1980, I would agree with you, but me personally, I refinanced my home, and during COVID, my interest rate's 2%. Debt is great for me because I can leverage that. I can have more money in the market that can earn a higher percentage than that. So we have to be careful with what advice we're looking at and what time frame that advice actually came out. But we want to be thinking about is very strategically what applies back then doesn't necessarily mean that's the best rules today. And when we're looking at these financial personalities, is they've maybe helped millions of people kind of through the different chaos and get out of bad habits. And that's fantastic. That deserves, all of the credit. But that advice was missing one thing. Whenever this advice is put out there for the masses, it's ignoring you. It's not looking at your income, your risk tolerance, your values, your beliefs, or your family situation. So a strategy that maybe helps somebody in their 30s, doesn't really help them in their 50s. It's two different worlds. I've seen a lot of people come in over the last year, either talking to them, coming in for meetings or talking to them about our different dinner events that we're having. They'll come in and say, you know what, I'm going to retirement next year, my mortgage is paid off, and I've got a 3-month emergency fund. That's fantastic. However, there's no investments there. There's no other arm for them to fall back on. And the problem with that is if you're hyper-focused on paying down a debt and building an emergency fund, sometimes you miss that opportunity cost of having money in the market or having other investments out there. And you don't have that kind of third stool to sit on in retirement. Typically retirement, you have pension, maybe, Social Security, and then investments. A lot of people are missing that investment arm. And I've been seeing this trend a lot with individuals coming in. They've been pay down on debt, build an emergency fund, and that's a great start. But if your debt's at 2 or 3% and the market's averaging 7, 8%, well, there's a pretty big delta there. So again, what worked 20, 30 years ago maybe doesn't apply to you. Or even some situations, I work with a lot of young professionals. Their investment allocation will mimic that of what their parents are, or maybe they're a 60-40. Well, if you're 30 years old, that's probably not the best investment allocation for you. Again, there's an opportunity cost with that. So when we have these missed opportunities to build wealth, it can cause pretty dramatic consequences down the road where if you're in that situation where you're going into retirement, all you have is Social Security and some cash reserves, we have to be careful with that. If the water heater goes out, that can blow up our financial plan pretty quickly. And if we're retired, we're not able to put that money back in there. So this isn't to scare you and give you bad news, but financial advice is, I think of it like if we go back to high school science class, it's like an amoeba, right? It's kind of this organism that just moves around and needs to be fluid, it needs to change. Markets are going to change. This financial plan and your savings plan, this needs to be flexible, okay? It needs to align with your goals, and your goals are going to adjust over time. So if you're still using that same financial playbook that you've been using for 20, 30 years, it's time to ask the question, am I following that just because I'm familiar with it, or am I following it because that's the best advice? Now going into the new year, it's probably a great time to sit down, review your financial situation, start to analyze where are there opportunities to make improvements, whether that's on the saving strategy, debt strategy, or investment strategy, or tax strategy, knowing that there's probably some things we can adjust because the advice that we're likely relying on is based on old data that doesn't really support kind of the more modern approach to financial planning. So if you don't know where to get started with that, please watch our YouTube videos or reach out to us. We'd be happy to sit down with you and help digest that financial plan and make sure the advice you're using is actually aligned with your goals and the things you're trying to achieve.
You made it. Years of hard work, investing, planning, and now you're here. The long-awaited reward you spent a lifetime looking forward to. But what now? After years of growing a nest egg, now you may want to manage it. Use it to fund your dreams. Make it last as long as you need it. And leave some for those you love. So what do? Wall Street continues to be uncertain, and some conservative options have dropped through the floor. How do you maintain opportunities for growth and reduce risk of loss from market changes? That's where we come in. We are financial professionals. From investments and insurance products to tax reduction strategies and guaranteed retirement income you cannot outlive, provided by the claims-paying ability of insurance companies. You've worked a lifetime to get here. Let us help you enjoy it to the fullest. For a complimentary consultation, simply contact us today.
Hey, welcome to this segment on who do you want sitting across the table from you. You know, we just had, part of this job can be super sad, and we had a client come in and they had lost their spouse, and they were explaining, their fear and their confusion and their grief. And as they were going through that, Leah and I are both financial advisors out of the Cadillac office mainly, and we looked at each other and we knew, we were like thinking on the same wavelength. Who would you want sitting across the table from you in that point in your life, dealing with all that grief and loss and confusion? What do you do? And so that became the segment of heading. As soon as, that client left, we just talked about kind of coming up with this. So Leah, do you have, kind of maybe that alliteration to make it memorable, the 3 C's that we might kind of go through, when there's a death of a loved one?
Yeah, so you want the person across the table to be competent, to care about you, and have zero conflict of interest on all fronts.
Yeah, let's talk about the caring, right? What have you seen maybe out there where you have these financial advisors that they just don't seem to have a lot of empathy or really care about their clients? Do you see stuff come across the table where you're just like, wow, it doesn't look like there's a lot of caring there?
Yeah, it's a lot of times when the financial advisor doesn't take the time to get to know the client and their family and the whole overall situation, and it's more so like the back of the mind thoughts that come up.
Yeah. And then what about the competence? So, when we're in this boat, whatever we don't know hurts the client. And so, the reason we love Centennial so much is because we are in a never-ending, constant pursuit to be industry best in any field. And so that takes a learning heart and a competence, because, if we don't know something, if we're missing something on our end, it actually, ends up hurting you. So that responsibility to maybe not carry every single answer, but have a pursuit to find the answer, the best solution, is so important. And so when it comes to competence, what did we do with this particular client to go through a process that, broke it down? What did we start with and what did we finish with?
Yeah, we just went through the 5 steps that you need for an overall plan. So you start with their income plan. They came in and they said, I have all this stuff, but what if this is mine? What money am I going to get each month? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? All the questions that he had. And so it was kind of a worry that he came in with that we were able to eliminate, just digging deep and going through that. So the next step we went through was his investments. He had all his logins. He's never logged into anything. He has statements from 2010, some older even, and he said, I don't know where any of this is. Who are the beneficiaries? Is any of this mine now? And so that was our next puzzle that we worked through.
And then can you talk about with tax planning? When you have a married filing jointly return, now we're going into the next year. What was the kind of solutions that we looked at doing there?
Yeah, there's a lot of different options, whether it's if they want big distributions to do something fun with their family or something like that. But then Roth conversions are always something that we look at as you're filing jointly for the last year. So we use our team and we work together and come up with a plan that makes the most sense for that individual going forward too.
Awesome. The healthcare was a pretty easy situation to solve for, and then finally the estate. The estate was not in good order, and so we brought in, our estate plan attorneys, and they sat through and got that into good order. So, what we've seen is that in that very vulnerable time, this is where your conflict-free is so important. When you're sitting across the table, trusting people's words, you need to trust their morality. And it's one of those things that staying conflict-free, staying free of any conflict of interest, what's best for one side of the table is so important. And it's really like a Snow White situation, right? You can't ever approach or be on the wrong side of that. If you're always doing what's in best interest of the client, hands down, you never ever cross that line. You care about people, you're competent. It's a great equation for the kind of people that you want sitting across the table from you. So thanks for sharing that, and thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful.
Your grandchildren are precious to you. They are your life. This is your time to have that special relationship. Taking care of yourself is taking care of them. Centennial Wealth Advisory is offering a free, no-obligation retirement review to make sure you don't run out of money during your retirement. Centennial Wealth Advisory. Your best is yet to come.
If you like watching Retiring Well, make sure to go to youtube.com/retiringwell and click the subscribe button to never miss any of our TV shows and other informative videos.
Let's think of cash like an ice in your hand. It looks the same at first, right? It feels solid and it seems safe. But if you hold it in your hand long enough, it slowly melts. And that melting is called inflation. And inflation isn't loud. It doesn't show up all of a sudden as a sudden loss. But instead, it quietly reduces what your money can buy. The price of everyday things goes up. Your cash balance stays the same. That difference is where the damage happens. People like cash because it feels predictable. There's no market movement, there's no headlines on it, there's no surprises, right? And for the short-term needs, cash makes a lot of sense. But comfort and protection aren't the same thing. Over time, inflation works against idle cash. Even modest inflation, year after year, slowly erodes that purchasing power, which means the same amount of cash supports less of your lifestyle in the future. Not because you spent it, but because prices have changed. And cash isn't bad, it just needs to have a role, like short-term spending, emergency reserves, flexibility. But if cash is expected to preserve long-term value, it's just a job that it was never designed to do. So the real risk with cash isn't volatility, it's invisibility. And because inflation works quietly, consistently, and over time, and if your money isn't keeping up, you're falling behind even if your balance never changes.